Hi folks, Will from MinIO here, and in this last video about transforms with Object Lambda, we're going to be showing you a little demo of how to stand up, deploy, and then call a Lambda webhook. Let's go ahead and take a look at some code. Okay, the first thing let's take a look at is the Flask web app we're going to be using to perform all of our transforms. So I'm going to go ahead and do a VI on web app. Okay. Now, this is just a simple Flask Python. It's a web app. It runs, it accepts posts. It's very generic. It is so generic, in fact, that if you take a look at these first two lines, I'm not even going to import or use any of the MinIO libraries for this. My webhook that is accepting data, that's going to get information from MinIO, doesn't need to speak MinIO. It simply doesn't. It does need to be able to send requests back and forth, which is why I'm importing requests, but it doesn't have to be MinIO. So let's go ahead and look at the code itself. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to accept a post. Post is the only thing I need to accept. And the nice thing about that is that I can say, well, I'm going to do a little if statement here. If you don't give me a post, I'm sending you an error and we're done. So that's another way that you can help secure things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the event that was handed to me. It is in the request.json. This is something that Flask does for us. It's going to give me all my request information, and then I can sort of parse through it. The first thing I need is my object context. You remember from the lecture that the object context, get object context, has basically everything we need. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the original URL. This is the original URL that I'm going to use to get the original object. So using that input S3 URL, again, this is our pre-signed URL to get the object. I don't need to know anything about any kind of credentials. I don't have any credentials that I need to have. It's all encoded in that pre-signed URL that gets handed to me. And then the other two things I need to get back out are the route and the token so that I can send the request back. So now that I've got all that information, and that's pretty standard boilerplate. Anytime I'm going to do anything, I'm going to need this sort of as a minimum to actually finish the process of sending all this stuff out. Now here in our next section, we're going to pull that original object from MinIO. We're using requests to get that. So we're using request.get. It's a handy little HTTP module that just allows me to do all sorts of fun stuff. That request is going to have in it my content. Now, this is where kind of the different code is going to come in. This is kind of the heavy lifting. This is where I'm going to actually do my transform. So don't worry too much about what I'm doing. Just realize that in this case, since I know that I'm going to be working with a text file and I'm just going to reverse that text file, that all I really need to do is say, okay, hey, look, here's my original object. It's in the request. It's content of the request. I know that it's UTF-8. I'm going to decode it. So I do need to kind of be aware of what I'm being handed. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reverse it. And in Python, that's how you reverse text. You just do that square brackets, colon, -1. That reverses your text for you. So, and then we're going to send the object back to MinIO. This is the last piece. We're going to make a response. The make response is part of Flask. I'm going to hand it the transformed object and a 200. The 200 is my return code, success. And then I need to make sure that I set a couple of headers. The first one is XAMZ request route. And the second one is XAMZ request token, and that's the request token and the request route that I pulled from the object context before. So this is going to be basically what you're going to send back. Send back the transformed object itself, a 200, a couple of headers, and you're done. Now, my else here is basically saying if you didn't send me a post, you get a 400 error. You're doing it wrong. And then the last piece here is literally just how I'm going to stand up my app and run it. I'm going to bind it to every IP address on the host. And I'm going to put it on port 7203, and that's, we're done. Okay. So that is my web app. I have my web app up and running right now on a server. It's Flask, and then there's some URL information, which we're going to see in just a moment. So now that I've got my webhook deployed, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to set that endpoint to be available. So this is a rather long, complicated MC command, but let me go ahead and break it down for you. The first piece is going to be MC admin config set, and this is going to be on MinIO 1. And I need to set up the Lambda webhook and its name. And what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to call it reverse, because that's what it's going to do. It's going to reverse the code. Lambda webhook reversed. I'm going to go ahead and line continue here. The next piece that I need is the endpoint, and my endpoint is my Flask endpoint. There we go. Flask demo HC1. All right. It is running on HTTPS, so I'm pretty secure already. And then the last piece I need, of course, is enable equals on to make sure it's all ready to go. I'm not doing any authentication. There's no MTLS, so that's everything. Go ahead and run that. It's successfully applied the settings. Now I have to do an MC admin service restart MinIO1, and it will be available for me. Okay, we're all restarted. Everything is happy. Let me go ahead and do an MC admin config get MinIO1 Lambda webhook. Now this is going to get all of the Lambda webhooks for me. There is only one, but there it is for you. Lambda webhook reverse. Endpoint is my flask.demo, and no auth token, no client cert, no client key, but it is absolutely enabled. It's ready to go. I have uploaded a sample file a little while ago. It's just a simple text file, and here we go. We're going to go ahead and run a client, Python 3 client.py. And this gets the actual object for me and prints it out. It's just a very simple, it's just a bunch of text. It's from Bob Ross, Lorem Ipsum, and easy enough to do. So let me go ahead and scroll up to the top here a little bit so you can see the very beginning. Zip, that easy, okay? Just remember that, zip, that easy. So let's take a look at the client and set up the client so it can actually request that transform. Okay, so this is very simple code, right? Import from MinIO. We're going to import MinIO. We're going to connect to the client. This is all very simple stuff that you've seen in many of our other developer courses. And the big change here is we're going to add a request parameters dictionary. And the request parameters dictionary has exactly one entry in it. It's very, very simple. There it is. It's my Lambda ARN. Notice again, reverse. That is the name of the webhook that we have set up, but the rest of this is all the same as we've seen before. And then down here, I need to add extra query params. And that is request params. And that's all I have to do. Now I'm going to request the transformed object instead of the standard object. We saw before when I ran the client PY, it just gave me the basic object. So let's go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and run this again. Well, look right there. Zip, that easy. I did not have to change my endpoint. I am still talking to my MinIO service. No changes there. I am simply saying, before you hand me back that object, send it through this webhook for me. And that is how Object Lambda works with MinIO. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you'd like to reach out with us, you can contact us using any of the methods you see here on the screen. You can Slack us on slack.min.io or just leave a comment here on the video. Thanks, and we'll see you for the next one.